It was a quiet weekday morning in Cincinnati, the kind where routine makes people feel safe. Customers lined up at a neighborhood bank branch, waiting to deposit checks, withdraw cash, or open accounts. Employees chatted softly behind the counters, the hum of printers and counting machines filling the air. Nothing felt unusual. Nothing felt dangerous. Then, just after mid-morning, the front doors opened, and a man walked in who would soon become part of one of the city's most puzzling mysteries. He wasn't loud. He didn't shout. He didn't wear a mask. Instead, he moved calmly toward a teller window, dressed in ordinary clothes that wouldn't stand out in a crowd. Witnesses would later describe him as composed, almost relaxed. He slipped a note across the counter. The message was clear. He was robbing the bank. The teller froze. No weapon was shown, but the threat was implied. The man's tone stayed steady, almost polite, but firm enough that everyone knew he wasn't joking. Bank employees were trained for this moment. They followed protocol, handing over cash while trying to memorize details. His face, his voice, the way he held himself. Security cameras recorded everything. Within minutes, the man turned and walked out the same way he came in. No panic, no rush. He blended into the outside world as if nothing had happened. By the time police were called, he was already gone. Officers arrived quickly, sealing off the bank, interviewing shaken employees, and collecting surveillance footage. Witnesses gave similar descriptions: average height, average build, ordinary clothing. The kind of person you could pass on the street and never notice twice. That was the first problem. He didn't look like a movie criminal. He looked like anyone. Detectives reviewed the footage frame by frame. His face was visible, but not clear enough for easy identification. He avoided looking directly into cameras. His movements suggested planning. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Investigators discovered the robbery had been executed in under 4 minutes. No getaway car was seen. No suspicious vehicle waiting outside. It was as if he vanished into the city's streets the moment he stepped out the door. As news spread across Cincinnati, the robbery shocked residents. Bank robberies still happened, but most were solved quickly. This one felt different. Quiet, clean, and deliberate. Police released still images from the surveillance footage, hoping someone would recognize the man. Tips began pouring in. Friends called about coworkers. Neighbors reported strangers. But each lead fizzled out. Then detectives noticed something else. Similarities to other robberies in nearby areas. Same calm approach. Same use of a note. Same quick escape. It suggested experience. Maybe even a serial bank robber moving between cities. But there was no solid proof tying the cases together. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. The trail grew colder. For the bank employees who had faced him that morning, the memory didn't fade. One teller later said, "It wasn't just fear. It was the way he acted like this was just another task on his to-do list." That calmness made the crime even more chilling, because it meant he had done this before, or planned it for a very long time. And somewhere in Cincinnati, the man who robbed that bank walked free. The investigation, the theories, and the mystery that wouldn't die. When the robbery first happened, detectives believed it would be solved quickly. Most bank robberies are. Someone recognizes a suspect. A car is caught on camera. A tip comes in. A mistake is made. But this case refused to follow the usual script. Within hours, local police in Cincinnati had collected security footage, interviewed employees, and notified federal authorities. Because bank robbery is a federal crime, the Federal Bureau of Investigation joined the case almost immediately. What they saw troubled them. The suspect was calm, deliberate, and efficient, someone who appeared to understand how investigations worked. The first challenge was identification. The surveillance cameras captured the robber's face, but not clearly enough for instant recognition. He avoided standing directly under lights. He kept his head slightly angled. It wasn't enough to hide his identity completely, but enough to make matching him difficult. Images were released to the public. News stations replayed the still frames again and again. A hotline was set up. Detectives hoped a friend, coworker, or relative might recognize him. They received hundreds of tips. Some callers were convinced the man was a former neighbor. Others swore he looked like a coworker who suddenly quit. Each tip was investigated. Alibis were checked. Faces were compared. But one by one, the leads collapsed. Meanwhile, investigators reconstructed the timeline. The suspect entered mid-morning, a time chosen carefully. The bank wasn't empty, but it wasn't crowded either. Enough customers were present to make the scene feel normal, but not so many that movement would be restricted. It was a sweet spot between chaos and quiet. The robber selected a teller near the middle of the counter, not one at the edge. That meant he didn't have to rush toward an exit or appear overly strategic. It looked casual, but it limited how visible he was to cameras at the front doors. He never showed a weapon. Experts later said that was significant. Displaying a weapon increases charges and increases panic. Panic leads to unpredictable reactions. By keeping the threat implied, he kept control of the situation without escalating it. The money he took was not excessive. Investigators noticed this too. He asked for cash, but not in amounts that would immediately trigger dye packs or tracking devices in large bundles. That suggested knowledge, either from past experience or careful research. Then came the most puzzling part, his escape. Cameras outside the bank showed nothing obvious. No car waiting. No one running. Witnesses didn't remember anyone rushing away. The prevailing theory became that he left on foot, turned a corner, and blended into ordinary city life within seconds. That meant one of two things. Either he knew the area extremely well, or he had scouted it in advance. Detectives canvassed nearby businesses for additional camera footage. They traced pedestrians and vehicles moving through surrounding streets. It was like searching for one specific drop of water in a river. At one point, investigators believed they spotted a man matching the suspect's description boarding a city bus shortly after the robbery. Transit footage was pulled. Passengers were identified and interviewed. But the trail faded again. The case began to shift from urgent to enduring. The FBI compared the robbery to others across the Midwest. There were similarities: calm demeanor, note-passing method, quick exits. But nothing conclusive tied the crimes together. If the Cincinnati robbery was part of a series, the suspect was careful to avoid patterns that would be too obvious. Years passed, but the case never closed. Inside the department, the file remained active, just quiet. Detectives rotated in and out. Each new investigator would review the evidence, hoping to spot something missed. Advances in technology brought brief bursts of optimism. Video enhancement software was applied to the footage, attempting to sharpen the suspect's face. Facial recognition systems compared his features against expanding databases. Still no match. Some theories emerged over time. One was that the robber was a local with no serious criminal record. Someone who lived a normal life, had no prior felony convictions, and therefore wasn't in any database. That would explain why facial searches failed. Another theory suggested he was passing through, a traveler, a temporary worker, or someone using the city as a one-time opportunity. If he left town immediately after the robbery, he might never have come under suspicion. A third possibility was more unsettling, that the robbery wasn't his first, and it wasn't his last, but that he operated infrequently, choosing targets years apart to avoid detection. Bank employees who were there that day were interviewed again years later. Memory fades, but certain impressions stayed vivid. They remembered his voice, steady, controlled. They remembered the lack of panic in his eyes. One teller said, "He didn't act like someone desperate. He acted like someone checking off a task." That detail lingered with investigators. Desperation leads to mistakes. Planning reduces them. The stolen money was never recovered. No sudden spending spree surfaced. No suspicious deposits flagged investigators. It was as if the cash disappeared as completely as the man who took it. Public attention faded over time. New crimes filled headlines. But occasionally, the case resurfaced in anniversary news segments or true crime features. Each time, someone new would see the suspect's face and wonder if they recognize him. Detectives still receive occasional tips. A viewer spots an old surveillance image and calls in. A retired officer revisits the case out of curiosity. Modern forensic methods are discussed: data analysis, AI-driven facial aging, behavioral profiling. The problem is time. As years pass, memories blur, witnesses move away, and evidence degrades. But sometimes, time also brings new tools that didn't exist when the crime first happened. Investigators haven't ruled out a breakthrough. Cases decades old have been solved by a single overlooked detail, a confession, or a technological advance. Somewhere, someone may still know exactly who that man was. Maybe it's a relative who noticed unexplained cash. Maybe a friend who heard a story told too casually. Maybe even the suspect himself, carrying the memory quietly, believing he got away with the perfect crime. For law enforcement, the robbery remains more than an unsolved file. It's a reminder that not every mystery ends cleanly. Some linger, suspended in uncertainty, waiting for the one thread that pulls everything together. A man walked into a bank in broad daylight, left with stolen money, and vanished into ordinary life. No chase, no arrest, no answers. Just a face and grainy footage and a question that still echoes years later. Who was he and where did he go? The case remains open. And somewhere in the quiet corners of Cincinnati, the story of that morning still waits for its ending.